Hi, well, welcome to the CBT Nuggets Continuing Linux series. In this series, we build on what we did in the introductory series with the goal of preparing you for the Red Hat Certified Engineer exam. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this introductory bit is just go over sort of a big picture of what's to come in the series. We start by talking about installation issues, and we spend 5 videos talking about installation issues. We go over everything from pre-installation considerations, like what kinds of hardware work with Linux, how much disk space is required, that sort of stuff. Then we move on and we talk about partitioning. Okay, so we go over the tools that you need to partition your disks, things like FDisk and Disk Druid. Okay, these are 2 useful tools that you should know about for partitioning your disks. Then we talk about a very cool tool that Red Hat has for automating the installation process, and this tool is called Kickstart. Then we talk about some advanced installation issues. We talk about RAID arrays, okay, and configuring a RAID array for your system. So a RAID array is like an array of independent disks. So it's for very high performance applications. You get much more performance out of disks if you can split them up into sort of smaller disks. You increase the bandwidth from the processor to the disks, and that improves the performance. And we'll talk about how to configure those on your system. We'll also talk about post-installation issues, things like validating your installation, important scripts and configuration files, that sort of stuff. Once we get done talking about installation issues, then we move on and we talk about the Linux windowing system. Okay, and we spend a couple videos talking about that. We talk about X Windows, and we sort of break down what the X Windows system is doing for us. And then we talk about the various desktop environments that come with Linux, things like GNOME and KDE. We also talk about the various window managers that come with Linux and sort of their function in the whole windowing process. And then we talk about basic system administration. And we spend 4 videos doing that. When I say basic system administration, what I'm talking about is the kind of system administration that you would have to do even if you had a system in your house and you were the only person that used it. Okay? So this is like very basic system administration, very fundamentally important system administration topics. First we talk about the RPM, the Red Hat Package Manager. So if you're going to install software on your system, this is the way that you're going to do it on a Red Hat system. No matter if it's your own personal system sitting in your den, or if it's at a corporation with 500 people, okay, you're going to need to install software on your system. We'll also talk about the rescue environment. Now when I say rescue environment, what I'm talking about is like if you go to boot up your system and it doesn't boot up, okay, maybe there's some hard disk failure or something like that. Alright, well then what you have to do is you have to boot into the rescue environment, and we'll go over how to boot into the rescue environment, the kind of tools that are available to you, and also how to poke around and actually fix problems once you're in the rescue environment. Okay, and then we spend a couple videos talking about user administration topics. We talked about user administration topics in the introductory videos, and we'll just build on those in this particular series. We'll talk about the user environment. We'll talk about groups and quotas and things like that. Okay, then once we're done talking about basic system administration, we move on and we talk about the Linux kernel for a couple of videos. So this is a topic we didn't even touch on in the introductory videos, a little bit too advanced for that series, and we bring it up in this series. We talk about upgrading the kernel, and we actually do a kernel upgrade from 2.4.18 to 2.4.20 in this series. Okay, and we also talk about recompiling the kernel, and we actually do a recompile of the kernel from source code. Alright, so these are very detailed topics. We spent a couple videos talking about the Linux kernel, and this is very valuable information for people that need to mess with the kernel and customize your kernel for some particular use. Then we talk about network and internet services for 5 videos, and I split this up as like network and internet services because some services are just for your local area network, while some services are more geared towards the internet, like Apache web server and things like that. So we start by talking here, we talk about NFS, which is the network file system. We talk about Apache, which is probably the most popular web server on the internet today. We talk about mail services for a video. So we talk about setting up an SMTP server. We talk about using POP3 servers. We talk about the various email clients that are available to you in Linux. We talk about DNS and bind for a video. Then after that we talk about news and FTP. Okay, so you see you get a nice well-rounded discussion of network and internet services in these 5 videos. And then after that, we talk about scripting for a couple videos. We'll continue what we learned from the introductory videos about Bash shell scripting, and we'll build on some of that stuff. And then we'll also talk about the Perl programming language, and we'll talk about Perl scripting. Okay, so this is your first exposure to Perl scripting if you're watching this series. And I give a nice introduction to Perl and kind of relate it to some of the things that we learned in Bash shell scripting. The scripting video in the introductory series, I got lots and lots of emails from people saying that it was so useful. Even though it was maybe just a teeny bit off topic, they just found it useful for helping them to do other things in Linux. They were able to read scripts that they didn't understand before and things like that. So I figured I would continue it in this series and talk not only about Bash shell scripting but about Perl scripting, because there's so many Perl scripts that just come with your Linux installation, and if you're curious about what they do, you have to be able to read the scripts. And so hopefully this particular video will get you on the way to learning Perl and being able to understand what all those various scripts do, and also being able to write your own scripts. And then we talk about security and performance for the last 3 videos. So we talk about performance monitoring. How do you monitor network traffic or CPU usage or memory usage, and how do you diagnose performance problems, and what's the problem, what's the underlying problem? That's what we're getting at there. And then we talk about security for a couple of videos. We talk about NIS. We talk about Zynet, which is the Extended Internet Services daemon. We talk about PAM, which are pluggable authentication modules, and we talk about firewalls. Okay, so this is what's to come. I hope this big picture kind of gives you an idea and motivates you to start the series. Get right to it and get down and dirty and start learning this stuff. And I hope also what happens is that my enthusiasm for the subject comes through, and that motivates you to go out and actually take the stuff that you're learning in this series and apply it to your job or your home system, or to experiment a little bit and then bounce some ideas off people. And the other thing about Linux is that it's a real community effort here. Okay, so I'm trying to help you out, get you started with this, but by no means should this be like the only education that you ever see with Linux. Go out there onto news groups, go out there onto forums and things, and post some questions and learn stuff from the other people that have been experienced with Linux a little longer than you have. There's always something to learn. I'm always on the forums every week, either asking a question. Every time I ask a question, I try to poke around and answer a few as well. So contribute to the Linux community, and I think it will contribute back to you. You'll see the rewards. That's all I have to say. Let's get started with the Linux series.